Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of this development diary for Pedro's adventure, The Sacrificial Link. This one's going to be more of a kind of description of what's going on in the background, so maybe a bit more technical than the last one, which is more of like a let's play of the first introduction and chapter. So, bear with me on that. Hopefully you still find it quite interesting about what's going on in the background here. So first up here, I suppose, is the dialogue system. So that's one I've created myself, and it's using the Unity GUI, Unity GUI system. We just have a couple of GUI textures and then a button here, and I've got a couple of routines in the background that calculates the length of the text that I want to write, and then it calculates how many boxes there should be and when the next box or the end box should come up. So it's kind of useful in that way because it means that I can just write the dialogue into a string and save that in a database and can call it through whatever, assign it a number and a character's. So if we go up and talk to Pedro's father up here, you can see that it tells you who's doing the talking. So here, so in the database there's a value for who's talking and then what the text is, and then the routine will split this up into how many lines it needs to be or can show for the length of the box, and it's all done automatically. So if that was a smaller box and a smaller screen, then it'll need more nexts before it gets to end. So it's kind of handy that way. I really wanted to develop a dialogue system where I could just type away and it would handle how many boxes there need to be automatically, and also it would be independent of what device you were on. So I've tested this on iPad, my iPhone, so hopefully it'll work when I move it over to the Android devices. And Pedro's movement, it's all grid based, so in behind actually all this nice artwork from Oryx Design Labs, it's just a big square matrix at the minute, and each tile has got a value associated with whether it's clear and able to walk into or whether it's got a wall, so you can actually walk through the walls of the house, because in this matrix there's a number saying I think walls are actually given a value of 1, and if that tile is not clear then Pedro can't walk into it. And then how this works is that enemies then have this enemy, as it is a tree stump. Tree stumps are known enemies with Pedro. They're given a collider in Unity, a 2D collider, so they register the click and then have the script for handling all the clicks, and then depending on what tag the collider has. So this is a game object with the collider on it, and then also got a tag of enemy, and if it's clicking an enemy then it goes through the routine of performing an attack for Pedro, calculates the damage, and then goes to see if the enemy can attack back. And of course tree stumps can't attack back, well, not these ones anyway, and then that's handled. So it's the same way. If we go back up to Pedro's dad, he is again, he is in like he's a game object with a collider, except he's got a collider of talking NPC, and it means that when the click's handled, because the tag is not an enemy, it's a player NPC, then it does slightly something different. And then if we click no, how this is handled is in this. I have a special tiles database as well, and the special tiles are the numbers in behind this array, and this actually one here, it's got a special this number is assigned to it, and if I go into it then it knows I want to leave this scene here and go to the next scene, and brings up this decision. And if you click yes, then it brings up the forest scene. And the forest scene, all these you can see the mud here, the flowers, the rocks, and the tree up here, they're all randomly placed, and again it's just a big empty matrix. It places the unwalkable objects first. So you can see this tree group of trees, this bush, rocks and stuff, they get placed first and put into the matrix in behind, and then it places the walkable objects, so you can walk over the mud and the flowers, but you can't walk into the tree. And then it places enemies lastly, and each have a different number, and then it runs through each square, have a separate routine. It runs through each square and sees what is in that square, and whether it should be spawned, or whether nothing should be spawned there, or whether one of the objects that can be walked upon, or the unwalkable objects or an enemy should be spawned. So, and then when the enemies move, that's keep track of in a big matrix, and it's everything's kept track in that matrix. So when an enemy moves, or when Pedro moves, then the matrix is updated, or the array is updated, that has all the information that's in the level at the minute. And there's the speed, so we're off trying to find the speed. It's hopefully seen in the last video. And again, the dialog box comes up, and if we click no, then we would have to run out this timer before we have to go back. I plan to have some sort of inventory system where you can select any time to head back to home, but that is going to be developed after the dungeon and the random dungeon generation, which I'm working on at the minute. So at the minute, that's the only way you can get home, is if you run out of your moves or you find the item that you're looking for. So yeah, so in behind it's just a big kind of matrix, and that's updated when enemies move, players move. The enemies attack back once you have either done a move into a space where an enemy can attack, or whether you've attacked an enemy. So the enemy won't attack until you attack it, but it may follow you around. Enemies have, I've called it an enraged range, so they'll follow you if you get within that. The birds have a slightly larger range than the mouses do, so you can see that the mouse ran away, but this bird's following me, and it's because the bird tries to the enraged range of the bird's larger than the mouse, so it'll follow me until it catches me. And then once you do an attack, then all enemies that can attack will attack, so that's why they're kind of like almost double teaming me here. And so you really want to try and avoid getting into situations where you the enemies can team up on you and do multiple attacks per turn, where you can only do one. So that's why I decided to invent the bow, give you the bow once you talk to Pedro's uncle, because it brings a bit more of an extra tactic to it, because then you can try and keep the enemies away from you by moving away and shooting your bow, but that might actually then run you into enemies when you're running away. So it also uses your step. So there's kind of like, hopefully it'll be this gameplay element of balancing your turns with trying to manage your health and keeping enemies at arm's reach. And at the minute you can't fire the bow, because it's in the story you only get the bow off Pedro's uncle. So at the minute, yeah, and how you get into fire mode, which hopefully I'll find the tools soon so I can show you the fire mode. Yeah, fire in the bow mode, because it's quite interesting. I had to develop some sort of method to check whether there was objects in the way between Pedro and your target, or whether it was clear to shoot, and also have some sort of minimum range and maximum range. So I was able to do that through, because you know the grid basically behind everything, then you know what squares to check through just some simple trigonometry to see if it was a clear shot or there was something in the way, and how far the shot was. The enraged range is actually done through a star algorithm, so that was also coded up so that the enemies follow Pedro, even if like there's obstacles in the way. Then they can like calculate which direction to move to find him. So as I mentioned, next up is in development anyway is the random dungeon generation. So that's spoiler alert, that's what the story that your uncle is going to tell you when the end of this introduction. He tells you to take a seat and he'll tell you a story. So that's what he's going to tell you, is that there's some way to rescue the villagers that are stuck in the village, and exactly what events took place and what the plan is to get them back. And to do this, you're going to have to go to these dungeons that are quite famous, and there's lots of them to explore, and you can go exploring in these dungeons, and each time it'll be a different dungeon, so that's why it's going to be randomly generated. And that's what I'm working on at the minute, is the dungeon generation. I've got the rooms at the minute to be placed without overlapping, and that worked pretty nicely. But what was it a little bit harder was getting the corridors dug out to link the rooms, and I pretty much think I have the majority of the bugs of it ironed out anyway. I can link two rooms together at the minute, and it should be a matter of just adding in a couple of loops to get all the rooms in the dungeon linked together, and that will hopefully, if everything goes well, be the topic of the next dev diary, where I can show you the next stage of the game. And I think that'll be quite nice and quite interesting, rather than just going around the same forest that looks sort of similar, because it's just a big square with things moved randomly within it. The actual dungeons will look different between the different size rooms, the different corridor lengths, and things like that. So looking forward to getting the dungeon generator up and running, and then once the dungeon generator is done, then I think the next step is the inventory system. And then from that, I will have to obviously decide on there's the hammer, the weapon attack, because at the minute you just do one type of damage. It's the same value each time, and exactly how to equip weapons. And so I've got some large design choices to make there, exactly about what I want each item to do. So if you equip a different sword, does it have like an elemental attack? And we see Pedro has a shield here, so what effect does armor have, and things like that. So I think the inventory and the equipping system is going to have a big kind of, I suppose, effect on how the final game turns out. So that's what I have to kind of figure out in my head. I've got some ideas what I want to do for the inventory system and how I want the attacks. I'm kind of thinking about having a normal attack, and then the normal attacks can be augmented through elements, so like a fire attack or a ice attack, and it affects different enemies to different rates. So that's what I'm leaning towards at the minute, but we'll have to see when I come to designing the inventory. So Pedro's got the bow now off his uncle, and to go into shooting mode you click him, and then it shows you that you're in shooting mode here, and then all you do is try and click the enemy and it will perform the attack. Performing attack makes the enemy enraged, so it will follow you. And I had it originally that you just clicked the enemy and the arrow was automatically shot, but if it was out of range, then if it was near the screen edge where you're tapping, Pedro moved, and you might not necessarily want them to move in that direction. So I thought it was more kind of the control system benefited from having to tap Pedro before you wanted to get into shooting mode, because it means you're gonna in the mode that you can't move and you want to try and fire an arrow. So that's shooting mode there, and just attack this bear and we'll kill it, and it says collect a bear's blood sample and gives you the option to return home. So that's all really the gameplay at the minute, and a bit of an update of what's going on and what's going in behind the scenes here for anybody that's interested in the bit more programming side of the game. Hopefully it wasn't too waffly, and there was some interesting details, but yeah, I am, as I said, working on the dungeon generation, and I think that should be done hopefully by this time next week, if I get some spare time this week and over the weekend, and hopefully have the next episode detailing that. As always, the description will have, if you want to play this version of Pedro's Adventure, the link will be in the description. It's a Unity web player, so just click, it's the game's hosted in my Google Drive, so if you click that link, it'll bring you to this and you can play the game, and I'd welcome any comments or feedback you have. So thanks for listening, and until next episode, see ya.